Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Indie Pop Girl, the podcast for music chat, new releases, hidden gems, and nostalgic deep dives. I am back and we are continuing with the Indie Classic series, and I will be discussing a banger of a record which is so iconic, and I can't believe it's nearly 31 years old. Where has the time gone? I will be discussing the 1995 debut record from Garbage. Garbage is the debut studio album by Scottish and American rock band Garbage and was released on the 15th of August 1995 through Almo Sounds. The production was handled by the band and driven by drummer Butch Vig, who produced Nevermind by Nirvana. He also started to produce remixes in the 90s for acts such as Depeche Mode, Nine Inch Nails, and U2 with band members Duke Ellington and Steve Marker. In the 90s, formed in Madison, Wisconsin, Butch, together with his band members, they were inspired through doing the remixes and experimenting with different sounds to form a band, to take all of the foundations from the remixing process and to translate this into a live band and a full record. The decision to have the band with a frontwoman was an inspired choice, and through Steve watching 120 Minutes on MTV, remember that show, and seeing a virtually unknown Shirley Manson in the Suffocate Me video to her band Angelfish was the breakthrough moment the three guys needed. It's like it was meant to be in discovering Shirley, and having her on board meant that she was able to work on the songs from a female perspective. Her skill of simplifying the loose skeletal versions of the tracks and rewriting lyrics was key, and Butch, Steve, and Duke trusted Shirley's process, and eventually, after the record went through many changes, it was finally complete in May 1995. Now, I was totally unaware of Garbage in 1995. It wasn't until the release of Stupid Girl in January 1996 is where I fully took notice. That song was everywhere, and during that time, I was listening to Virgin Radio a lot, and I was exposed to Stupid Girl very quickly. I was also exposed to MTV2, and they played the video, like, a lot. I was fascinated and intrigued by the visuals and the sound that was coming out of this band. I had never seen anything like that before. And of course, there was Shirley. I was fascinated about her appearance in the video, and like discovering Tori Amos 2 years before, I found myself having another girl crush on another fierce redhead. I think it was seeing Garbage on Top of the Pops is when it all clicked into place for me. I was 15, and up to that point, I was so obsessed with Madonna and discovering Tori Amos. But there was something about Shirley and how she presented herself just spoke to me. I wanted to be her so badly. I was obsessed with her dress sense and her outspoken, fierce nature. And she was the inspiration when I started to dye my own hair a few years later. I had left high school by this point and I was feeling lost and miserable. Naturally, I am not an angry person or angry in nature, but I was feeling confusion and a lot of sadness around this time. And it was when my anxiety started to creep in, and it's been with me ever since. I credit this record and Tori's Boys for Pele, which was also released in 1996, as having the most impact on me during that time. I got lost in both records, and it really pulled me out of a dark time at such a young age. It's funny when you look back and you think about how music can have a profound impact on you. The Garbage debut came to me at the right time and I just got it. And in February 1996, I was so lucky to see Garbage at Wolverhampton Civic Hall, and it was one of the wildest gigs I've ever experienced. Getting crushed in the mosh pit and seeing Shirley so close is something that has never left me. I played the CD to death, and I know this record inside and out. It's been with me in my life since 1996. And yes, there have been periods where I haven't reached for this record or I haven't listened to it in months, but somehow it's always there. It's always there in the back of my mind. A track will appear on a playlist and I will get reminded of the album all over again, and the memories come flooding back. And I guess I am going through the same process by revisiting this record as part of my podcast. It's such an iconic and monumental record for me and played such a huge part in my life that I could not pass up on the opportunity to talk about it as part of the Indie Classic series. As I've mentioned in previous episodes, I will not be playing clips of the songs, so if you are curious, then please support the artists I cover by streaming, downloading, or buying physical copies. Thank you. Track 1, Super Vixen. Garbage don't give you any time to settle into this record or gently adjust to their sound. Super Vixen just launches at you. It's immediate, it's loud, it's brash, and it absolutely makes statements as an opening track. There's something really clever about the contrast here. The verses feel almost restrained, moodier, more controlled, with Shirley delivering those lines in a softer, cooler tone. Then the chorus hits and everything expands. Her vocal shifts so effortlessly from understated to commanding, and that dynamic switch is what makes the track feel so powerful. She's completely in control of it. I'd say this leans more guitar driven than some of the later tracks, but if you really listen, especially with headphones, there's still that electronic undercurrent weaving through it. Subtle textures, little production details. That blend of analog grit and digital sharpness is such a huge part of what makes Garbage, well, sound like Garbage. And honestly, listening back in 2026, it's kind of amazing how forward thinking the production still feels. It doesn't sound dated, not even slightly. It's fresh, it's punchy, it's confident. The mix is so deliberate and layered that it still holds up against modern alternative production. And then that ending, Bow Down to Me. It's bold, it's theatrical without being cheesy, it's iconic. Shirley Manson closing the opener like that feels like, well, a declaration of intent. What a woman. Track 2, Queer. A complete shift here. If Super Vixen throws you into the deep end, Queer pulls you under slowly. It's moodier, more sensual, almost trip hop esque in its beat and pacing. There's something hypnotic about it, and again, so ahead of its time. In 1995, this must have sounded completely alien to mainstream rock radio and what was in the charts back then. This track is all about Shirley's vocal performance, that controlled snarl. She doesn't oversing it, she doesn't push, she just locks in and delivers every line like she means every single word. There's confidence here, but it's measured, calculated. She sounds dangerous in the calmest possible way, and that is so difficult to pull off. The production is fascinating, the samples, the electronica, and the way the groove just sits there and simmers. It's minimal, but it never feels empty. It actually demands repeated listens because there's so much happening underneath the surface. Little textures and details that reveal themselves the more you sit with it. And then that guitar solo in the bridge just blows the whole thing open. It widens the track, gives it this surge of release before dropping you back into that tight, controlled atmosphere. I think it's such a smart structural moment. They open their shows with this, and that makes complete sense. There's tension built into it, and I'll always get goosebumps hearing those opening beats, knowing Shirley is about to walk on stage at any second. The anticipation and the atmosphere. And I loved how they incorporated elements of their remixes into the live arrangements. It makes the songs feel even more expansive and immersive. It's seductive, confrontational, and completely self assured. A bold second track that proves this album isn't going to sit in one lane. Track 3, Only Happy When It Rains. I think a lot of people are familiar with this track, and it's probably the one that immediately comes to mind when you say garbage. I would say this and Stupid Girl. And I'll be honest, I didn't listen to this for quite a while because, to be honest, I was feeling a bit fatigued with it. I played this album a lot back in the day, a lot. And sometimes that just happens. You overplay something you love and then it just needs a rest. It doesn't mean the song is bad. It doesn't mean it's lost its magic. It just needs breathing space. So I gave it that break. And I'm very happy to report it still goes hard. Hearing it again in preparation for this episode, especially within the full context of the record, reminded me why it became such an anthem in the first place. It's self aware, a little tongue in cheek, and completely embraces the melodrama of alternative rock. Musically, it leans more guitar driven, but those synth textures are still sitting there in the background, giving it that unmistakable garbage polish. That's what makes this band so interesting. Even when the instrumental is leaning on the heavier side, there's always that electronic undercurrent holding everything together. And Shirley's backing vocals here, they absolutely elevate the track. The layering adds depth and texture, and it stops the song from feeling one dimensional. It gives it that big anthemic quality that makes a chorus hit every single time. It's funny how stepping away from something can make you fall in love with it all over again. And hearing it again now, it doesn't feel tired. It feels classic. Track 4, As Heaven Is Wide. So we are fully into album deep cut territory here. And my God, this track has not lost its magic whatsoever. As Heaven is Wide still hits with that aggressive edge that I absolutely love. There's a grit to it. The synths and drum programming feel almost percussive in their own right, driving the track forward alongside that fuzzy, distorted bass line. It feels mechanical but alive at the same time, which is such a Garbage signature. And Shirley, she is pissed off on this track, and I love it. I am so here for it. She delivers that commanding vocal with just enough bite. There's aggression there, but she never tips into chaos or over singing. It's controlled and focused, and it matches the instrumentation perfectly. That balance is what makes it so powerful. She sounds furious but composed. There's also so much interesting production tucked away in here. The switch ups, the way the beat shifts and plays against the live drums. That subtle layering you don't always clock on it casual listen. And those moments where Shirley's vocal is slightly pitched or chopped up, I can't quite make out what it actually is. It's in the background and it creates an interesting texture. And Garbage are certainly the masters of always adding elements into the production. So it never comes across as repetitive or that they're not switching things up enough, because they do, and sometimes you don't always realize it or catch it straight away. It's one of those tracks that really rewards close listening. On the surface, it's punchy and aggressive. Underneath, it's intricate and experimental. And honestly, it's one of my favourite vocal performances on the entire record. There's something about the energy she brings here that feels raw, but still completely in control. An underrated moment on an album that's already stacked. Track 5, Not My Idea. Well, talking of insane production, what a great intro this track has. It just grabs you immediately. There's no easing in and no subtle build. It's sharp, punchy, and completely confident from the first few seconds. We're back to that more guitar driven sound that we heard earlier in the record, and it hits so hard. The riffs feel tight and deliberate, and the rhythm section locked in. Again, it has that slightly mechanical edge that Garbage do so well, where even the rock moments feel precision engineered. And this one goes so hard live. Back in the day, I watched so much of Garbage's live performances, and Not My Idea always takes me straight back to those Rock Palace shows. I had those performances on repeat. There was something about the rawness of that era, the intensity, the energy, and the way Shirley commanded the stage that just felt electric. Her live presence back then was so electrifying. She would be so fucking pissed off at times, and this was all part of the package. She wasn't sugarcoating anything, and it was what she felt at that moment, and it was so refreshing to see. The Rock Palace videos are easily accessible now, and I still dip in whenever I feel like revisiting those memories. It's such a time capsule moment. Watching those performances again, you can see how tight they already were as a live band. There's no hesitation, no uncertainty. They knew exactly who they were. This track captures that spirit perfectly. Sharp, confident, and completely unapologetic. It's another reminder that this debut wasn't just about studio innovation, they could back it up on stage too, and they still can. Track 6, A Stroke of Luck. We reach the halfway point of the record and we're back in that electronic space. After a run of punchier guitar driven moments, this feels like a shift inward. It's moodier, cooler, and slightly detached. I hadn't heard this track in such a long time, and I honestly forgotten how good the production sounds. Once again, not dated in the slightest. Listening now, it still feels sleek but with so much power. There's nothing clunky or overly 90s about it. It just sounds fucking immaculate. And what I've always loved about Garbage is how they balance the guitars with electronica with so much ease. It never feels forced. It never feels like they're trying to fuse two worlds that don't belong together. It just works and clicks. You can really tell that the boys are experienced in remixing and production. They understand space, texture, and layering. One of my absolute favourites from them is the Zephyr remix of In Your Room by Depeche Mode. And this track kind of puts me in that Depeche Mode space. There's that brooding electronic pulse underneath everything, that cool, slightly industrial atmosphere. But at the same time, A Stroke of Luck has this ethereal quality floating above it. It's softer around the edges. There's a vulnerability in Shirley's delivery that makes it feel almost dreamlike. It's such a unique track in their discography. It doesn't sound like anything else on the record, and it doesn't really sound like anything else they've done since either. It sits in its own little world. It's a hidden gem right in the centre of the album. Track 7, Vow. Talking of commanding vocals, here we have Vow, which is an absolute beast of a track. Holy shit, guys. From the intro alone, you just know Shirley means business. There's no hesitation, no softening. The tension builds immediately, and when she comes in, she doesn't dilute that energy for a single second. Those biting lyrics land because you believe her. She sounds so furious and pissed off, but not in a chaotic way, but in that controlled, simmering way that only Shirley can pull off. You believe that she's going to break this person's soul apart because of how angry and pissed off she sounds. And that level of conviction is rare. She channels some serious energy into this track, and the band match her perfectly. The grinding guitars and the tight drums, and everything is locked in behind her. It's aggressive but never messy. Again, that precision is what makes Garbage so strong. Even at their angriest, it's still crafted. And if you've seen them live, you know how she ends this song. Those ad libs, that extended, almost exercising release at the end. It's explosive, it's cathartic, and it turns the whole thing into a moment that you never forget. Tracks like this are exactly what I needed back in 1996. It gave you that strength. It gave you this almost superhero like feeling that you could get through absolutely anything. There's something empowering about that kind of controlled rage, especially delivered by a woman who refuses to shrink herself and back down. And the fact that I still feel that all these years later, well, that says everything. It's not just a song, it's armour. Track 8, Stupid Girl. The massive smash hit that started it all off for me. That intro is instantly recognisable. The drum sample, lifted from Train in Vain by The Clash, is iconic in its own right. But the way Garbage recontextualised it made it feel completely new. And the second it comes on the radio, my heart still does that little leap. Some tracks are untouchable. They're iconic for a reason. They stand the test of time, not because of nostalgia, but because they're just that good. And Stupid Girl is one of those songs. It's got attitude running all the way through it, but it's smart and ridiculously catchy. It's commentary wrapped in a hook that refuses to leave your brain, and again, that balance between gritty guitars and sleek electronic production is flawless. And then there's the music video. Directed by Samuel Bayer, it felt so ahead of its time. The distortion, the glitchy textures, and the aesthetic choices, it all perfectly matched the sound of the song. Shirley in that now iconic dress and boots, standing centre frame, completely owning it. She wasn't performing for approval, she was commanding the space, and she was already an icon, even back then. Samuel Bayer had directed David Bowie's The Heart's Filthy Lesson the year before, and you can absolutely see his visual stamp across both videos. That stylized grit, that slightly unsettling polish. But what I love is that he always keeps the focus exactly where it should be. The artist is never overshadowed by the concept. The spotlight stays on them. And honestly, I have lost count of how many times I've played this song, and yet it has never lost its magic. It's never lost its power. It still hits, it still feels fresh, and it still feels bold. For me, this wasn't just a hit single, it was the entry point, and what an entry point it was. Track 9, Dog New Tricks. Now, this might be an unpopular opinion, you'll have to let me know, guys, but I actually prefer the PAL remix of Dog New Tricks, which appeared as a B-side, and that's the version the band chose to play live. There's just something about that remix that hits differently. It leans further into the groove and it feels slightly darker and more expansive. But I'll talk about that a little bit more later, but I just wanted to note it here. That said, the album version is still a great song. Lyrically, it's incredibly relatable. It feels like Shirley is speaking for all of us, especially in verse 2. Every single word lands and it's honest in a way that's almost uncomfortable. There's no glossing over the messy bits and no pretending we're all perfectly evolved human beings. It hits right in the chest because it feels real. This is what I love about Shirley as a writer. She isn't afraid to tap into those spaces that can feel awkward, vulnerable, even slightly ugly at times. She'll say the thing you might not want to admit out loud, and does it without apology. Then the bridge comes in, and it's like she twists the knife just that little bit further. The phrasing, the delivery, it's subtle but devastating. And it's the emotional turning point of the track, and it lingers. Listening back to these songs again has been such a reminder of why this record meant so much. Even the deeper cuts have layers and emotional weight. And honestly, it's just so good to be back in this world. Track 10, My Lover's Box. Another track that absolutely hit live. Those guitars are just magic. There's something about the tone, slightly abrasive but still melodic, that makes the whole track feel urgent. And the mix is so interesting and unique. Everything feels intentional and nothing is sitting there by accident. This is where Butch's production chops really shine. There's a constant tension and release happening between the instrumentation and Shirley's vocal. The verses feel controlled, almost restrained, and then the chorus just soars. It opens up without losing the edge, and that dynamic contrast is what makes it so satisfying. You can hear the track slowly building, especially heading into the bridge. It doesn't explode all at once. It accumulates layer by layer. There's this growing pressure underneath everything, like it's winding itself tighter. And then the outro. It's chaotic, but in the best possible way. It feels like the song is unraveling while still charging forward. It actually reminds me of Tunnel Vision by Magdalena Bay. I know that it might sound like a strange comparison at first, but it's that same relentless momentum. Both tracks feel like they're moving forward with this unstoppable force, like a freight train that refuses to slow down. There's that shared sense of propulsion and intensity. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Magdalena Bay have taken some inspiration from Garbage at some point. That blend of precision production with emotional punch, and that balance of polish and grit. Garbage were doing that decades ago and kind of set the template with their production style. And many artists would take inspiration from Garbage and their sound. My Lover's Box is one of those tracks where you really hear how ambitious this debut was. It's not just a straightforward rock song, it's layered and constructed, it's chaotic but structured, Garbage style. Track 11, Fix Me Now. Honestly, for a debut, there are just no skips. They just keep going and track after track, and they're still delivering at this stage of the record, and that says a lot. Fix Me Now feels punchy and immediate. There's an urgency to it that keeps the energy high this late into the album. Shirley gives us a slightly different vocal tone here, and it really works. The verses feel darker, more contained. There's tension sitting underneath them. And then the chorus hits and she belts. It's such a satisfying contrast. The way the track opens up in the chorus to make it feel lighter, almost cathartic. It's that classic tension in release dynamic again, but never feels repetitive. They find new ways to do it each time across the album. It's also ridiculously catchy. The hook gets stuck in your head without you even realising it. It has that addictive quality that Garbage is so good at. Sharp, slightly edgy, but it's still got the melodic undertone running through it. In live, it translated perfectly. That energy carried straight through. It didn't feel like a filler or a deep cut just sitting there in the set list. For an 11th track on a debut album to still sound this strong, that's impressive. Track 12, Milk. What a way to close out the record. Milk is honestly one of my favourite Garbage tracks. From the album version to the Tricky remix released as the single, it's just so powerful. It shows a completely different side of the band, restrained and cinematic. Shirley's vocal here is beautiful. It's tender without being fragile. There's a quiet strength in the way she delivers it, and you believe every single word she's singing. And it feels so intimate and honest. It's not sugary sweet. It doesn't overdo the sentiment. Sometimes all it takes is a simple line, I'm waiting for you, and that's enough. The understatement makes it hit even harder. Listening back, I'd forgotten just how incredible the synth work is on this track. The production is full, lush, and immersive. It wraps around you. There are no guitars fighting for space, just atmosphere, layered textures, subtle swells. It feels cinematic in a way that almost foreshadows where the band would go later. And honestly, when you hear this, it's no wonder they were chosen to record a James Bond theme just a few years later. They already had that sense of drama and cinematic mood in their DNA. It's a stunning way to end the record after all of the grit, the attitude, the anger, and the aggression. They chose to close the record with something expansive and emotional. No guitars, just atmosphere and no synths. How could you not love it? If you're new to Garbage and feel that this record would be something that you enjoy, I'll highly recommend that you check it out and the rest of their wonderful discography. But I really can't just end this episode without talking about the B-sides from this era. Believe me when I say that these songs are so strong in their own right, and they definitely could have made the final cut in the track listing. The B-sides are so iconic for the Garbage debut, and to be able to talk about the tracks from this era, it's important to do the era justice and give these additional tracks the respect they deserve. So the first B-side was Subhuman, which was originally released as an international B-side to Vow and was included on the Japanese edition of Garbage as a bonus track with Number One Crush. It's hard to believe that this didn't make the final cut and became a bit of a cult track at the time. And I remember that I struggled to get a copy of the Vow CD single for so long that I eventually gave up the search. The track is widely available now, but back in the 90s, there was no streaming, kids. You had to really do the digging, and I guess that was all part of the thrill. I remember walking into my local HMV, my heart pounding, thinking that it would appear, and then I just ended up sulking all the way home, empty handed. Next is Number One Crush. I think a lot of people who grew up in the 90s will be familiar with the Nelly Hooper remix, which was included on the Romeo and Juliet soundtrack. I remember going through my friend's CD collection at the time, and she had a copy of the Romeo and Juliet soundtrack, and I was so desperate to listen to Number One Crush. She agreed to let me have the CD for a while. I was broke and I didn't end up buying my own copy, but I was good and ended up returning the soundtrack to my friend. On the 20th anniversary edition, the original version of this track was included, and it is interesting hearing both, but I still prefer the remix. Next is Trip My Wire, one of the B-sides to Queer, which I was able to get a copy of the CD single at the time, and it is just so iconic to me. The song was elevated even further during their live performances, and I urge you to check them out on YouTube. Next is Butterfly Collector, the other B-side to the Queer single, which is in fact a cover version by The Jam. I didn't give this B-side enough attention at the time, but slowly over the years, the track has really got under my skin quite a bit. I can't put my finger on why. The eerie instrumental and production is definitely impactful with the biting lyrics. The original version, of course, is from a male perspective, has still got that biting frustration. The lyrics don't hold back, putting this woman in question down. But there is something about Shirley's icy delivery which is also so biting and effective. But it's from the female lens, and she puts her stamp all over it, and it's probably one of the most interesting cover versions ever made. Next is Girl Don't Come and Sleep, both B-sides to the CD single of Only Happy When It Rains, which I managed to track down at HMV, and they are completely different sonically from each other. Both on the short side, but they managed to pack in so much. Girl Don't Come is aggressive, slightly manic, and is the complete opposite of Sleep, which is softer, reflective, with a hint of regret. It's something that Garbage do so well that they just don't stay in one lane. Their production and layers still fascinate me, and to get tracks so strong like these mentioned as B-sides is just so rare. Driving Lesson and Alien Sex Fiend both appeared on the Stupid Girl single, which I also owned and played to death. Driving Lesson is classic Garbage. That perfect balance of electronica and guitars is just so irresistible. Now, I had a more complicated relationship with Alien Sex Fiend. I think I was so blinded by Stupid Girl and Driving Lesson that I forgot about this one. I didn't give it enough attention, which was so pathetic on my part. But I am happy to report that I have now made friends with Alien Sex Fiend, and I am sorry for ignoring you. The electronica and weird experimentation is right up my street now. I also have to give a shout out to Dog New Tricks, the PAL mix which I mentioned earlier on. This is also part of the Stupid Girl B-side era and works so well live. How they were able to take one of their own tracks and fully remix it like that is just a save. The band also recorded a cover of the Vic Chestnut song Kick My Ass for a charity album, and this is included on the 20th anniversary edition of Garbage. If you're not aware of the B-sides that I have just mentioned, I do hope you check them out and let me know which are your favourites. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. Please follow me on Instagram and Threads at the Indie Pop Girl. If you've enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you could follow, like and share, as it helps other music lovers to find the show. I am also on YouTube. You can find me at the Indie Pop Girl Podcast, and I'd be grateful if you could like and subscribe, as I'm creating content, shorts and posting teasers for upcoming episodes. You can also find me on TikTok at the Indie Pop Girl Podcast if you want to give me a follow over there. There is a public Spotify playlist available, and I've added some of my favourite tracks from the artists and records covered on the podcast. This will be updated as the episodes drop, so if you are curious with any of the artists and albums that I've covered, please give it a listen, and who knows, you might find a new discovery. You can find me on Spotify at The Indie Pop Girl, and the playlist is called Favourite Tracks from Podcast Episodes. I'll be back very soon, and I'll be continuing the Indie Classic series with another iconic record with one of my favourite frontwomen of all time, Karen O. A little clue there, but you'll have to keep your eyes peeled on my socials when I reveal which record I'll be talking about. Until then, I'm Rachel, the Indie Pop Girl. Thanks for listening, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.